which led us to timing tweaks rather than straight health nerfs. It's possible we overdid it. Max, do you plan to do another post-mortem? I don't want to ask a bunch of questions if this isn't the time and place. I'd like to talk about it, make it into a YouTube video, and just never think about it again, just because I don't want people to, like, repeatedly ask me questions. Like, dude, I'm just going to be tilted off the face of the earth if, like, you know, I'm streaming, like, 2 weeks from now, having fun, doing some undercover content, and some random dude just comes in, completely innocent, just asking a question, and be like, yo, Max, how do you feel about the time that Blizzard nerfed Raszageth? And I'm just gonna go into the Shadow Realm. Like, I don't know. I was thinking about that all day yesterday. I hate that a lot. How do you think all difficulties dropping at the same time affected the race overall? For example, it seems like Echo chose to do more splits week 1. Yeah, Echo and us had like a different gearing strategy for sure. Basically, they chose to spend 3 entire days gearing, and we spend to take 2. Valuing the day of progression. It netted them 1 more eye level total. It's just a choice, right? It's do you value the 1 progression day over the 1 eye level? They both have their advantages. If you get the 1 eye level, that extra day is like efficient because like you're going into the raid with just much more information, right? And sometimes the eye level matters and sometimes it doesn't. I don't think the extra eye level mattered at all this raid, like literally not one time. But in other races, it absolutely could have, right? Like for sure. Max, if you started your raid earlier, do you feel like you would have beat Echo? I mean, anytime you start, like, doing hindsight stuff, it doesn't really work. Like, I mean, they literally one-shot it after the change, right? But if we had, like, a couple hours to warm up and pull, like we did, like we killed a couple hours after we started pulling, would we have killed it or been, like, able to do that? Maybe. But that's like, I mean, that's not like, that's like total hindsight. Like, we didn't know when we went to sleep the previous night the boss was being nerfed. And we knew we needed to get a full day of rest and try to push for a kill the next day, right? So you do that. Plus, I mean, that it wasn't like we woke up late. It wasn't like we slept in. That was our normal raid time. We even woke up an hour early, and it was still nerfed ahead of time. If we woke up at our normal raid time, it would have been nerfed an hour and a half or so before we even started playing. Basically, our schedule this raid was dictated by maintenance. It didn't really have anything to do, like, we weren't waking up late and oversleeping, right? Like, 7 a.m. is the US reset time, like right now with like current daylight saving shit. By the way, daylight saving is annoying. I can never figure it out. Okay, so we had 4 hours of maintenance on the first Tuesday. So we, for the previous weeks, had actually delayed our sleep a lot, and we were not actually going, for the first time, we were not actually going to wake up, like when the server reset was. Because we had done that for the past 2 tiers and sometimes had sat around for 4 to 6 hours of maintenance, and then it actually like ruins your mental. You're just sitting there ready to play. You're tiring yourself out for no reason, and you're literally just wasting time. So what we did this raid was we just said, okay, we're just going to wake up when the maintenance ends. And then we're just going to start our raid day then. We'll still do a full raid day. We're just going to push our hours back and not have 4 of those hours be AFK like we've done for the past couple raids. So, I don't know. I feel like it's really not controversial at all. That's why our raid times were the way they were. And then on this first reset, there was another 4-hour maintenance. We didn't even have to change our sleep schedule on the reset. So that's why we were raiding at that time of day. We weren't raiding less. We were just waking up later in the day. And yeah, I guess when we went to sleep the night before, we knew we had 1 more day to kill it. So we were going to get 1 less hour of sleep, wake up and try to kill. And that's what we did. But it was still nerfed and killed before we woke up. So if we knew it was going to be nerfed at that time, in hindsight, would we have woken up at 5 or 4 a.m. and gotten 3 hours of sleep and fucking slammed a bunch of monsters and tried to make it work? Yeah, but we didn't know. No, I don't. The only decisions that would have been changed, I feel like could have only been made in hindsight. By the way, that is the most common question I've seen. And I feel like that's the most reasonable answer to it. And I feel like it's not controversial at all, but people always get super worked up. But I haven't been on Twitter, so I don't know if like someone's ripped some like insane take on Twitter that has to do with us waking up or something like that. But that is something I've seen the most, is like people are just like, oh, well, it was nerfed when you were asleep. Well, why didn't you fucking wake up then? And like the pretty easy answer is we did wake up early, but it was still nerfed before our raid time started, or more than an hour. So I mean, I don't really know what else to tell you. It's not even like defending or complaining. It's literally just answering a question. It seems pretty logical. Echo was also at 8% while you guys were at 14 when the nerfs came in. Yeah, at every raid, you're going to reach a point where people are waking up and going to sleep and passing each other. So, for example, if this nerf happened the previous night and we one-shot it or killed it quickly, a Liquid fan could say, oh, well, it was fair because Echo went to sleep at 19% and Liquid was at 14. just like what you just said. And that would have been true. But then obviously we went to bed and they woke up and passed us, just like both of our teams did to each other for the past like 3 or 4 days. Blizzard wanted this boss dead before the holidays, probably not even for the race, just for their own employees. That's why you constantly saw these massive nerfs over and over again. I think it's very clear. I don't know if they'll ever really say this, but they wanted it dead. I don't know if there would have been a proper time to tune this where they feel like someone didn't get fucked over. And I'll give a few examples. Let's say they nerf it the previous night and the P3 is that slow and that easy. I want to say 100% if that was nerfed the previous night after Echo went to bed, we would have killed it. Like, definitely. Because we would have just changed everything easily, right? But they didn't, right? But that would have been fucked for Echo. If they waited 4 more hours to nerf it on the day that they did, as Echo's like ending their day, and we started, right? Like, that would have been fucked for Echo. So, like, I don't know if waiting a few hours really helped. It was always going to be fucked because it's just kind of fundamentally fucked. So I don't know if Blizzard... it's hard. Like, it still feels so weird as a competitor. I think 2 things can be true. Blizzard was in a tough spot. They probably had to nerf it. And how do you... If you tune a boss that poorly from the beginning... How do you, like, rectify that with as many nerfs and at the right time? Because, like, there were nerfs this raid that benefited us and nerfs at this raid that benefited Echo, right? There always is. I don't know. I think the best way to describe it is I don't know how much of a choice Blizzard had to nerf this and have someone not feel cheated. But at the same time, it definitely makes sense for us to feel like complete shit because of it. Right? Like, I mean, I actually wish we got fucking shit on. That would feel so much better than this. Like, I wish Echo just played out of their fucking minds and, like, killed that boss before the nerf somehow, which I think both of our guilds on that day probably would have gotten it to, like, 4 or 3% at the absolute best. But I wish they would have just fucking owned us, because at least then you can wake up and be like, damn, dude, that guild fucking, like, they absolutely, like, deserve every bit of this. Not to say they don't deserve it now, but, like as a competitor, you can... That is easier to deal with than this. This just feels fucking terrible to the point where I literally don't even want to talk about it. That being said, though, I think we played a really good raid. I think we played fine on Raszageth. I think they absolutely played better than us on that boss. Not by a lot, but I think they played better than us on that boss. And that is something that makes me not want to I'm not going to, like, fucking write a twit longer about it. But that also doesn't mean it doesn't suck. That's for sure. Would have much rather that ended pretty much any other way, really. It's devastating to lose. It's even more devastating to lose like that. Max, you say they played better than you. What are some examples for this on Raszageth? I don't know. Just like when you're raiding, you, like, see where you're at and you see where your opponents are at, and you're like, damn, they just did this part of the phase. They didn't, like, do it way better, but they did this part, like, a little faster than us. I found myself saying that on, like, multiple parts of that fight. Like, when you're doing a really, really hard boss like that, it really separates, like, players than your guild. Like, you see huge differences between players and strategies. They just had, like, really sound thinking on that boss. Great execution. I think we did too. Like I said, I think from the very beginning, I thought they played that boss a little better than us. We got there a little bit ahead of them, but they played that boss slightly ahead. But I don't know. I feel like this raid was very close. Like, I feel like, I feel like we were very, 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 very close for sure. I think the thing they did better than us this raid for sure as well was P1 consistency. Our P1 consistency was not great. Our P2 consistency, P1 intermission, P2 intermission, P3 was excellent. Probably exactly the same. I haven't gone back and watched the two side by side, but I would bet their P1 consistency was a lot better. What is this f***ing music? What am I listening? I'm sorry. I'm so stun-locked by what's happening right now. Let's see. Now that the race is done, what is the plan for the guild going forward? What are the goals now? Get better. I mean, there's tons of things we can get better about in this raid. Our healer preparation was fucking abysmal. Really fucking bad. We got to fix that immediately. That is one of the things from me that is almost totally delegated to people who understand healing better. And our healer preparation, execution, and knowledge base was off. Where I feel like the rest of it was actually pretty fucking good across the rest of it. No, there's always things to get better. I think we played really fucking good this raid, by the way. I think a lot of people get caught up on first or second. I think that nerf could have happened at a different time. Certainly, I think even without a nerf, I would have loved our chances later on in that week pushing the actual Enrage if there was no, like, weird Christmas shit. I feel like we played really fucking good. So, but at the same time, yeah, you always have ways to learn, better players, things like that. For now, over the next couple weeks, it's like you do sales. You make so much fucking gold. in the next couple weeks. You're just so geared and you can actually carry things that other people can't. Probably recruit some new players, stuff like that. Just like that you always do. How's the guild morale? I mean, losing sucks. We always seem to enjoy each other, you know. People get along pretty well here and have a good time. Some of everyone's best friends are all raiding here together in the guild. We went out last night drinking, went bowling, had some fun. But dude, I mean, like, anyone who tells you that losing doesn't suck absolute ass is full of shit. It sucks so bad. Losing sucks, man. No doubt. And it should suck, and it has to suck, you know, unless, like, what are you doing? How do you get the drive to get better if it doesn't suck? But I mean, morale in our guild is always, like, I feel like that's like kind of what we're known for, right? And that's not made up. I mean, like, we usually have that pretty much under control. How did Shaq and Fired Up take losing? They seem super casual about it. I mean, I think pretty much everyone took it the same way. Because, like, we were, like, getting up and walking to the facility when they killed it. And we just heard Echo killed it. We're like, dude, holy fuck, that was insane. And then we read that there was a hotfix. And then we all felt really dog shit. That's basically exactly what happened. It was like, goddamn, Echo played good. Echo's fucking insane. And then as soon as we heard that news, we were like, this feels terrible. That's exact. I mean, that's literally Fired Up's exact words. Was like, damn, I was like really impressed when they killed it. And then I heard that it got hotfixed, and I saw the hotfix, and I was really upset. Do you hate bosses being live tuned all the time? Yeah. I mean, what kind of answer do you want? Like, obviously, the answer to that is yes. Every single Race to World First Guild competitor and everyone would like to get to a boss that was tuned to be killed properly from the second you get to it. Wasting time on something that is eventually nerfed just feels bad, right? Like it feels like you just want all that stuff to be ready ahead of time. This is probably one of the most wrong they've gotten it. Like, they've made insane nerfs in this raid. We were doing Dathia, and they nerfed Dathia like an absolute fucking shitload. They nerfed Dathia to have an entire 5th ad, and then also reduced her health by like 60 million or something. We get to Kurog. We do like the first like 50 pulls of Kurog or something. I don't even know how many pulls that boss took, with ads that had like 20 million more health or something, and then they nerf those by 15%. Makes the boss infinitely easier. We get to Broodkeeper. Randomly, Broodkeeper's perfect. Broodkeeper's like somehow just exactly right. And then Raszageth, basically every single phase had to be massively nerfed every time we got to it. So you get to a phase, it gets nerfed. You get to the next phase, it gets nerfed by 50%. You get to the next phase, it gets nerfed by 50%. You get to the next phase, they trivialize and nerf it. I mean, it's literally, that stuff is frustrating to everyone involved, every guild that has to go through that. It's dog shit. Dude, that makes me chuckle how Broodkeeper is so spot on. It's odd how you can have a boss that late be so perfect while others around it are mega overtuned. I'm telling you, I pay so close attention to stuff like this, and I will never understand like how that happened. Like, how do you get this? How do you get every boss around Broodkeeper so unbelievably wrong, and then Broodkeeper's right, and then it goes back to being unbelievably wrong? It's so strange. It doesn't make sense. Like, usually they use a lot of those bosses to like they use it to like gather information to like see what the DPS check should be on this boss, see what it should be on this boss. Max, do you guys not have a crew that watches for nerfs and stuff like that made overnight to alert the squad when it happens? I mean, no, but also that's not what happened. Like, we were identified of it when we were sleeping, and then it happened before we started playing and we were getting to the facility. Like, there is no, like, when you need a certain amount of sleep, there is no, like, someone waking up and, like, sounding the fucking alarm and, like, ringing the bell and making sure people, like, get up and come to raid as soon as possible on no sleep. Also, I think that's, like, something the community in general doesn't understand, is doing bosses like Raszageth and like the Jailer and like Halandris. You cannot do those bosses on low sleep. When you notice that sleep is affecting you, it's usually later in the day. Like, usually when you wake up, your body will like make it work. But like, if you're really like sleep deprived, later in the day, you start becoming like a vegetable when you're playing this game. And once that starts happening to like 2 or 3 people in your raid, you are probably incapable of killing a boss that difficult. So, like, staying on top of sleep is very important. That being said, I think it's important to mention this because there's still a lot of takes on this that are just so strange. It's so strange to see the amount of people talking about sleep. We didn't oversleep this raid ever. We slept a normal amount of time, underslept on some days to push hours, and that never changed. we never did that. And also, just to tie up that subject, just because it got brought up again, I will tell you exactly what they said to us. Finding a perfect time for a change like this is tricky. a couple hours from now, and we'd have the very legitimate concern from Echo that we applied the nerf 10 plus hours into their rating day as they were winding down and you guys were getting started. Also, as we said before, the same argument can be made if they did the nerf last night when Echo was sleeping and then we killed it, right? Echo would obviously feel like shit just like we do now. And then he says, and once it seemed that it was a few percent out of reach with current gear, just standing by and watching hopeless pulls continue didn't feel right either. This was meant to be a light touch. We just... most of the discussion among the team for the past day was, what can we do that isn't just going to hand someone the kill? Which led us to timing tweaks rather than straight health nerfs. It's possible we overdid it. They just had what was objectively their best pull of the week 20 minutes after the hotfix drop, so it's hard to say for sure right now. I know this is a frustrating way for it to end. Do you think a casual conversation that happens during your pulls are a good vibe or a bad thing? There's a balance. If we never joked around all day, only full focus, we would actually play bad because people would just get bored and they would be like, the morale would just be terrible and that would make you play worse. But at the same time, joking around and laughing too much can certainly affect your pulls negatively just because some people can't focus on both things at once. So it's definitely a balance. There's always a balance. Max, if it wasn't Christmas, do you think they would have let it go to next reset? That boss would have died this reset. Here's exactly what I think would have happened if they didn't nerf the boss. I think us and Echo would have spent an entire day optimizing boss damage, making some spec swaps, things like sub to assassination, MM to BM hunter, a couple other things just for like pure boss damage. And it would make the P1 intermission harder, it would cause some regression. You'd probably get the boss to about 3 or 4%. And then I think you would eventually 3 heal to kill it. I think 4 healing, like it would have been easier to learn 3 healing and have the damage than it would be to 4 heal and find that extra 3% with the before the nerf. The issue with 3 healing though is your 4 healers are Evoker, Priest, and Paladin. You're not going to play a DPS or tank, Priest, or Paladin. So you need like your raid buff from those 2, and then you need the 2 Evokers to have those 2 stay alive. So who do you drop? Do you drop an Evoker? Okay, you have to use a Battle Res and P1 on your Paladin, I think, on the 6th shield. Okay. Do you drop your Priest and lose your Fort buff? Probably not. I think the best solution would have been 3 healing and drop me. But the disc also, like, solos the Storm Surge shields, but you could probably figure those out without a disc. So maybe you bring in, like, Shadow for disc. Shadow would have absolutely fucking blasted that fight after the buffs, but it was just like a burden slow class. Maybe you play Devastation Evoker. Devastation Evoker is certainly not a strong class for that fight at all, but would have been obviously like a, you know, would be pretty good. I think you would have done something like that, but that boss would have probably died on Sunday or Monday. It is very, very... That last phase DPS check was absolutely fucking crazy. So do I think Blizzard made sure to nerf it? If like, Christmas wasn't a concern for both the Raiders and the Blizzard staff, would Blizzard have not nerfed this boss as much and let it go to reset? I think the answer to that is definitely yes. I think Blizzard would have... I think they would not have done the same thing. I think... I don't know if they've even come out and openly said as much, but I think that is obvious. Because, like, they've never done anything like this in any other raid. Not even just the last nerf, but all of the previous ones too. Why, in your opinion, did Devastation Evoker see so little playtime? It's a damage class, and it doesn't do quite enough of it. Also, kind of a fundamental issue with Devastation Evoker for sure is that Mastery is like their best simming stat, but it's kind of a bait. Because there's very few bosses that truly matter, as end bosses that truly matter from 100 to 0, where their Mastery is balanced. Most of them are 30 to 0, or in this case, 70, 65 to 0. And just in general, your Mastery just has less value in those scenarios, right? You still get it in your cooldown window, but like it definitely matters outside of it. So, how'd the first race with talent trees feel? Extremely weird. Not for every class in the game. Basically, most meta classes right now all have something in common. And it's that their talent trees can have easy access to single target and AoE without majorly changing their trees or having to completely spec out of one to get the other. And that's exactly why they're meta. Because in Raid, AoE and single target both matter, and being able to do both just makes you better than a class who has to choose. And there are classes in this game currently that are really good designed, but unfortunately, their talent trees are so different in single target and AoE that they are completely incapable of doing one or the other, or sorry, doing them at the same time. It has to be one or the other. Arms Warrior, Unholy Decay, Elemental Shaman, Like, these classes are literally going to be unviable in the future if Blizzard does not address this. Because you just simply cannot compete in an environment where you need to do both versus a class who is going to do as good as you in both, but they just have to spend less talents to do it. Max, on the finances topic, viewership on Twitch for both your and other members and the main Liquid Race World First looked pretty solid. Was this one of the most watched, and does that improve financial viability for these in the future, or does that support the Liquid mothership pretty much? We're hard chilling under Liquid. None of that shit matters to us at all. We make our dollars no matter what. But viewership was actually down. Main reason is we started muting this race to talk about tactics, which certainly fucking destroys viewership for the sake of competitiveness. And also, this is the second raid in a row now where there has been multiple days of splits at the beginning of the race. And the simultaneous raid release in general also was a drop in viewers because, quite simply, a lot of the viewers for the Race World First are not WoW players and didn't know that it was actually happening. Like, I'm not kidding. And then I think there was a collective sigh of like, damn, this is bullshit. As soon as we started logging in and just went and did splits. You could see it in the viewer count. You could see it in people's like thoughts and what they were saying. As soon as you started doing splits when the raid came out for the second raid in the row, so many people were just like, dude, this is fucking lame. And that was it. It's hard to stay engaged with that. So I think splits, which are always going to happen as long as there is tier bonuses in the game, there's the days of going into Mythic as the first thing you do are 100% gone. They will never happen again, which is fine. I think tier bonuses are good for the game. It's just like an unintended consequence of the race. But yeah, I mean, that's just the way it's going to be. What did you think of your role this raid? Do you feel like you contributed a lot to the raid compared to other raids? I actually contributed a lot more this raid. In the past, what I've done is, just in the sake of getting better, I delegated more responsibility to other people. And for me, as a leader and as a person, I just firmly believe that if you're ever not an expert at something, you should just hire someone who is and delegate it to them, right? But there's like pros and cons to that. And one major one with me is I'm insanely ADHD. I have to be very involved with everything that I'm doing or I will lose all interest and get super bored. As soon as someone else is in charge of something, I completely just zone out. And I noticed that over time, as we have like done more of these races, that like delegating is good in nature, but I still have to be in charge of it while still allowing them to advise me. Like obviously they're running it, but like I have to make myself be involved with it or else I'll just be ineffective, right? Like I'll lose interest. I'll just get bored. So I've made myself a part of more things because of that. Race World First should get acknowledged by Blizzard as an official event so the funding can be provided so more guilds can participate. Okay, this is a take. Now it is literally 2 guilds. Third place doesn't even touch toes with Echo and Liquid at the moment. Yeah, there's a fucking massive gap after our 2 guilds, for sure. But that has nothing to do with funding. In fact, I'm pretty sure, I'm not actually, I think Method might actually have more funding than Echo. Just, I don't, it's at least close, right? Because like you've seen some players leave to go one to the other in the past where money was certainly an incentive. It wasn't some of their better players, like not Fragments or any of those people, but like, you know, like just you've like heard stuff like that. By the way, this is not me like breaking news. Like this is all just speculation, right? Like to my understanding, I don't think the funding between those two is very different. It's not really funding that sets apart the race like this. In fact, I've said this in the past, but I don't think there's ever going to be a scenario where there's 3 guilds competing for the Race World First. I think the only reason it works right now is because there's just one in each region that can like kind of compile talent. It's almost impossible for any other guild to compete. Here's what funding does for you. Funding allows you to keep good players in your guild longer because they don't have to quit and get a job and move on with their life. That's like pretty much it. But it does not help you attain players. No one's out here offering giant contracts and like getting players. No one is joining a guild for money. There's no chance you would be good enough to play at this level if you were playing WoW for the fucking money. Like, there's no way. Like, that never is a decision-making thing. It's you find a guild that you vibe with, and then over time, it allows you to keep pursuing your passion, really. Here's what it really is. It's player skill, and it's experience. Let's break down the player skill part. Here's the reality. The teams at the top are not offering bigger contracts and like crazy things that other guilds can't do. They're just better guilds. And people want to move up and challenge themselves, and they want to get world first. So if you are in the 2nd or 3rd ranked team in a region, anytime the 2nd or 3rd ranked team gets a really good player, you know, they have a really high ceiling, they're pretty new to the game, they seem really, they're the best player in that guild. They get recruited to the number 1 team probably 9 out of 10 times. And it has nothing to do with money, right? It's like the opportunity to grow your stream. It's being a part of a better guild. It's a chance to win. And that just happens. Because the reality is, like, you're basically, the top teams are recruiting the best players of the teams just under them to maybe be a player in the raid for them and most likely sitting on their bench. And if your players on your bench are the best players of other teams, how in the fucking world can you compete with them? And it's not fair to them either. This isn't like a fair system. It's just reality and how it works. That alone is just insanely hard to overcome. And it's just, I don't know how there'd be any way to fix it unless this becomes some kind of official event and there's like salary caps and fucking like trading restrictions and drafts and shit. But that's not what this is. In fact, I think the reason the Race World First is popular is because it's not any of that shit. And then the other one is experience, right? Even put yourself in Method and BDG's shoes right now, right? They can probably prepare for every single boss in this raid on their own, but so much actual like actionable things that you do to learn and solve problems in progression happen in progression as you are doing them. And you kind of have to go through the process of doing that on your own to actually get good enough at it to create things that will win while other people are having more efficient raid days following you. But how the fuck can Method and BDG get good at that when the most efficient thing to do is to just copy what us or Echo do? Because it is. It's just more efficient. Like, finding out their own solution to a problem that's already been solved is a complete waste of time. So, like, how do you develop those skills? Do you raid blind? Do you just not look at what anyone else does? Clear the raid way slower, by the way, just in the sake of getting better. If you're trying to win the Race World First in 1 to 2 years, that probably is the best thing to do. But what can you tell your sponsors and your other people involved about your raid placement as you go through that process? Who's going to stick around for that? This isn't the NBA with like Philadelphia 76ers trust the process shit. That doesn't work. For those reasons alone, which I think they're all backed by logic, it's just kind of impossible to imagine that the Race World First could ever be more than just 2 teams that are realistically able to win. Did that answer your question? That was probably a super long-winded question. I think the original question was like, how can we get more funding to have other teams compete? And then I basically explained how funding is not relevant in that and why you don't see anything change in that way. Why is Asia not able to compete? I mean, they start even later than EU, but all that stuff works itself out in the end of a raid. That's not an issue. There's not like an Asian team that's finishing 2 days behind World First and like has a chance of winning it and they were 2 days behind. Like, that argument isn't there. So if anyone ever just makes the statement of like Asia can't compete because they're 2 days behind, that's just wrong. Like, there's just not any information to support that. In fact, I think in literally every raid that's happened in the past 4 years, you could give them, just using the time that they've killed it, even assuming that they've had our strats for as many bosses as they've killed because of the time release in previous raids, you could have given them the raid a week ahead of time and they still would not have won. And that's not even assuming for the fact that they would have to, in that case, actually come up with their own stuff. And that's not flame, by the way. That's literally just doing math. That's just like looking at like where they're ranking and where they're starting and stuff. But like, you could also make the argument though in their favor that like if they did start at the same time, they would take it more seriously. Like, because they feel like innately they're so fucked and behind that like they don't even try in the first place. But the thing is they've like, I don't know if you guys have paid attention to that scene, but they've like developed super teams and like recruited all the best players to one team and gotten fucking major sponsors that paid even more than what Liquid pays us, like just to like try to compete. And that hasn't really resulted in them ever being anywhere remotely as good as like us or Echo. So I don't know really what causes that, because like Asian like countries are fucking absolutely cracked in other video games. So like if I thought the best talent from like Asia was playing like MMOs and WoW, would they compete in the Race World First? Fucking 100%. But they're not, right? So I think those countries care way more about League. Max, do you think the Race World First will lose some of its luster strictly due to things like splits? Yes. Not only do I think that will happen, I think that's already happened. I think that's happened. That has already happened. Splits have absolutely ruined Race World First viewership. There's no question about that. Was Arcane very broken for progress? Yeah, Arcane on the right player right now is definitely the best class in the game in a raid setting. But it's interesting and it makes sense that it hasn't been nerfed, because if you look at like statistics, it's just going to trend lower with like not as good players. And it's basically just a burst thing. The reason why Arcane is so good is because there are things in this game that increase your burst, like Power Infusion and Blessing of Summer, and that class just does like absolutely unreal burst on a pretty reliable time frame. Not to mention that mages are just a way better progression class than they have been in the past. Like, fire mages have always been insane because Cauterize exists, but like other mage specs have like kind of fallen off a bit, I think, because like fire, like Arcane and Frost just kind of died in a raid. I feel like mages are actually unkillable with greater invis on all 3 specs, and just like, I don't know, displacement, they're just insanely mobile. The class seems pretty fucking cracked right now. Mage is really good. What if Blizzard never nerfs and the race just lasts like 4 weeks? I mean, that would not be, I mean, literally you just saw that happen with Sepulchre, right? That was an absolute nightmare for everyone involved. You say the eye level from Splits doesn't matter, but how do you guys feel about the torch from Brood? They had 3, 4, or 5 more than you guys. I mean, that trinket was turbo broken. Like, that definitely mattered. But I don't think that mattered too much with us. I think we had very similar Broodkeeper kills. I don't think we specifically targeted the Broodkeeper trinket. We didn't like skimp on Broodkeeper runs. We skimped on other things. I don't know the exact numbers of how many we ran, but it's possible that they just got more of them to drop. I have no idea. I thought we had pretty good luck on Grief Torches. Like, we got a decent amount to drop, but they had way more than us. So, or maybe they ran like way more Broodkeepers specifically than I thought. I didn't think so. They had 2 mythic Grief Torches drop on the reclear as well. What? Wait, really? They had 11, 5 mythic. Okay, well, that's just, I mean, that's actually just fucking, like, pure RNG. By the way, I don't think that mattered. Like, that could have mattered. If this went down to a no nerf late of this week actual kill on that fight, I think that would have mattered. I don't think it mattered because as soon as they nerfed the boss, it was just free as fuck. Like, that boss was just going to instantly die as soon as they nerfed it. But, like, if they made that boss, like, really, really hard to kill, those Grief Torches could have definitely mattered. Like, we didn't, when we saw those nerfs, we didn't even optimize our comp for boss damage. We didn't play Assassination Rogue. We didn't play BM Hunter over Enhance. We didn't make a few other changes. Like, there was a few things we were doing on the platforms, too, to gain more boss damage. We didn't have to do any of that, because as soon as they nerfed it, the boss was free. But damn, that is insane luck. I actually had no idea they had 5 mythic Grief Torches. That is fucking insane. That is actually insane. Do you think it's viable for someone who's just starting in WoW to get good enough in 6 months to participate in the raid? Yes. If they're already an absolutely cracked video game player, then yes. In fact, those are the players I'm actually looking for the most. Because, like, someone who's played this game for, like, 5 or 6 years right now, you're basically who you are. Like, you're who you are going to be at the game. And, like, you know, that's just wherever you've ended up and however well you do. But, like, if someone's just started playing this game in 6 months, like, if someone's literally playing this game for the first time right now, but, like, 2 raid tiers from now, they, like, do really well in their first guild, move into a second guild, and they're, like, they're the best player in their guild 2 times in a row. They start rating top 50 world. And then, like, that player's, like, been the best player in his guild 3 times in a row, is massively moving up the thing and just started playing the game. That player has an insanely high ceiling, and that's someone you would want to get in your guild immediately. And it may end up being a dud, but that's what trialing people is for. It may end up that they don't quite get to the level necessary to be at this level, but they have a pretty high likelihood to, based on what you've seen so far, right? So you end up recruiting that person. There's a lot of people who followed that trajectory. Like, James was kind of like that. Exile was kind of like that. Why did you play Splat instead of THD? He had multiple more eye levels of gear. Have you lost any faith in the longevity of competitive rating? Not really. I mean, I feel like, I'm pretty sure as long as Liquid and Echo are around, competitive rating will be interesting and will be fun to watch and compete in and do. And I don't think that is changing ever, right? So I think there is one thing that's definitely a little doom about the race, though, and that is and I don't think that Blizzard should change this, because this would be making a change for the race and not for everyone else in the game. But tier bonuses fucking tank race viewership so much, because it's the only reason we're doing this many splits. And I think if you just say right now, okay, the beginning of the next 4 Race World Firsts are all going to involve 2 to 3 days of splits, that's just terrible. Like, that's the worst thing ever. And that's probably reality. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty dooming, for sure. How difficult is it to prepare for possible buffs and nerfs? Were there any class changes before the raid opened or as it opened that caught you off guard and hurt your pre-planned roster of characters? No, actually. Like, so yes, you always have options. So I think we thought Arcane Mage was going to get nerfed. And now in hindsight, I see why it didn't get nerfed, because I just don't think there's a lot of players who can play it at that level. Like for example, like I don't think Blizzard exclusively nerfs for the very highest percentile. If I were to guess, I would bet Blizzard probably cares way more about what the 50 and 75th percentile look like for classes than like specifically if there's a huge discrepancy between that and the very, very top, which is pretty much Arcane Mage. When we were sure Arcane was going to get nerfed, so we only had 2 of them going into the raid. And then like they didn't nerf Arcane on that Friday before Mythic, and we just literally had Eric drop his hunters and just level 2 mages the Saturday before Mythic came out. And that was the characters he ended up maining. So he was a little low on Primal Chaos, but we just planned on having him do Mythic Plus at the beginning of the raid and just get a bunch of Primal Chaos because he was going to be behind on gear anyway, and then he would just come in later, which he did. That's a tough spot as a raider. Dude, are you fucking kidding? Dude, I did not want to tell him, man. Do you know how hard it is to tell someone that? Hey, so you know the 6 hunters you've made to gear over the last 2 weeks, right? And you've been like up all day, every day, fucking farming rares and dirt and just whatever and Wrathion rep and just everything on all those characters. Okay, so all of that was a waste. And we need you to level 2 new characters right now, 3 days before Mythic on a class that you didn't prep on at all because you're the only one in the guild who could do it. And that it makes sense to do it. We have one too many hunters. I mean, that's a turbo down bad, like, that sucks. And he's an absolute fucking champion for doing that. If I can give Blizzard any props, it would be that I think they did a really fucking good job of designing a end boss that was good on its own. Like it's kind of hard to say with all the nerf stuff. Like, not even the last nerf, but just like the fact that, like, it's hard to call a boss good when each phase you got to had to be nerfed by 50% as soon as you got there somehow. But like, I actually think Raszageth looks cool. The mechanics are cool. Now in its finished form, well, the last phase is a complete joke now, but like now in its finished form, it's like a pretty cool boss, I think. If you just like I'm not trying to say how like we will remember the fight or how Echo will remember the fight, but like how someone who tries to get cutting edge a month from now will see Raszageth. I think it'll be a very fondly remembered fight. Regardless of how good the fight was on its own, they clearly designed that They designed that fight for Evoker. Or let's say they designed the fight and then they made very sure to make a few things work to where Evoker utility was really put on showcase. So this was probably the most evident in things like rescuing people on the platform, but also more in like keeping them on in P1 during the pushback, but even in other stuff too. Like Evokers have this ability that's super niche called Unravel, and it's a on GCD instacast 9-second ish. I think it might be reduced by haste button that just does more damage to shields. This fight has a red side platform that has a massive damage burn during a shield. And like, I don't think that was an accident. And Storm Surge happened to be a shield burn. I don't think that was an accident at all. I think it was very intentional. Not to mention that Rescue also is super fucking insane for the Mythic version of Tempest Wing. Like, just very clear. And also, Time Spiral was literally necessary for multiple classes to live in Mythic P1. So, like, there's, like, almost every piece of utility they have was just, like, put on full display to see, like, okay, you want to know when you would run an Evoker? Here's every reason why you would ever run an Evoker, and they put them all in one fight. Which is really cool. I think it's really cool they did that. It was a nice introduction to the class. Why was DH so good at Raszageth? I mean, DH was just good in general. I don't think they were that good. I think they were specifically great for Raszageth. They didn't worry about boss uptime in P1. It was great to have one on each side in the intermission. That's probably the main reason you ran Demon Hunters, actually. Their boss damage was pretty good. Yeah, Havoc is just like a good raid class. It's not amazing. It's not bad. It's probably just really good. It's like a really good raid class. The issue with this raid is that there were a couple classes that were like fucking unbelievable. Like rogues were incredible. And like when rogues are incredible damage wise, especially with multiple specs and multiple different types of ways they can deal damage, you stack the fuck out of them because they're unkillable. They have cheat, death, and cloak. Case closed. Super fucking broken class, right? So like rogues were way insane in this raid. The rogues were better in this raid than they've been in years and years and years and years and years. They were so good. Mage was super fucking broken. And like think about Raszageth, right? Like anytime you have ports, they're super good. They're really good at fulminating charge. It's like mages and rogues were just goated this raid. First tier Warlock isn't OP. Yeah, Warlock. I mean, Warlock is a good class. It's always a good class. It's certainly not OP though. Probably more in like the single target area and the 2 target area. Like, dude, we literally sat a Warlock on our Kurog kill. I think that was the first time a Warlock was sat from a Mythic World First boss kill. I mean, I don't even want to make something up. Maybe someone could look this up, but it may be ever. I don't know if it's ever. It is probably at least like 8 or 10 years or something. It might be. I actually think it might be ever. I think that might have been the first World First boss kill that has ever sat a Warlock. It's not even common for Warlocks to be average. Like, normally Warlocks are like one of the 3 best raid classes for like 6 years. So like having them be sittable is crazy. Because even when they're like average or above average, you would never sit one. Like, they were actually dog shit. Why did you sit them? They were trash. They were trash on Kurog. They were way worse than other classes. We could have still killed it with one, but I mean, they were just less damage than what we could bring.